Hello everyone and welcome back. Last week I did a video titled Never Do This to Your Harley, and I've been quite surprised, to be honest. It's gotten quite a number of views and also a tremendous number of comments from various different sides of the spectrum. I do review comments. I wish I had more time to answer a lot of those. Sometimes when I see comments and questions, it is actually on topics that I've already made videos on. But this is a particular case that I want to cover. So I would say let's revisit what never to do on your Harley. And I want to show you something that just may surprise you. So stick around. Let's get to it. In quick review in that video, what I was referring to by never do this to your Harley was while you have your motorcycle, and not just your Harley, but any particular engine really, repetitively starting it and only letting it run for short periods of time, not bringing it up to normal operating temperature, and then shutting it down, and doing that repetitively during its storage, maybe winter storage or something like that. And I gave some of the technical reasons why. I did read through quite a few of the comments, and in those comments, I started to realize there were a lot of points that I had forgotten to mention. Very, very valid points that I wanted to cover with you guys in support of, never do that to your Harley. Now, before I do that, I do want to say there was quite a number of comments that I saw from people that said they've been doing this their whole life, 30 years, 40 years, and they never had a problem. And I think that's absolutely wonderful. I think it's great that you've never had a problem. And I know people that do that as well that seems to have never had a problem. But we have to remember there's a lot of people with a lot of different engines, and I see a lot of different scenarios. There are things that come into play. Maybe your environmental conditions. It could be any number of things that is maybe contributed to the fact that you never had an issue. And I congratulate you for that. I think that's awesome. The fact that you've had success does not negate the facts that it could create a problem for someone else, depending on their situation and their conditions. Now, before I go into a couple of the other details that, thanks to you guys, the viewers, where you guys had made some comments about other factors to consider that I forgot about, I'm going to get to those here in just a second. But I also want to thank all of you for leaving all the kind comments you did. It was really interesting to read through them all. And some that, excuse me, many that, I've been telling my friends this for years and I didn't know how to explain it to them. Or, I've always done it that way. I never start my engines and all that sort of thing. So, and then quite a few number of compliments on the video. So I want to thank all of you for that as well and your contribution. I appreciate it. So I want to show you some photographs. Now, shortly after posting that video, I was sent a copy of an email from one of our viewers, a fellow named Tom, and it was just coincidentally, well, not really coincidentally, about a year or so ago, a year and a half ago, Tom sent me some pictures of the inside of his engine. Now, he had a 2021 CVO, a 117 that only had about 300 and so miles on it. And in that email, he basically, he had developed an engine noise, and then they tore his engine down to find a tremendous amount of rust on the inside. And I'm going to put these pictures up here, and you can see that there's some surface rust in a couple of places on the flywheel and on the balancer, but pay very close attention to the bearing for the balancer. There's a tremendous amount of rust that's there. Now, his condition, the motorcycle was stored in a climate-controlled building. He only had 300 and some miles on it, but he was also doing some traveling. I believe it was for work and things like that. But over the course of his winter break there from travel, he would start the bike and run it for 2 or 3 minutes, and then he would shut it off. And then he repeated that a few times. And so the question was, where could, excuse me, where could all this rust come from? And in the response to my email, I explained to him essentially the topic of the video that I'd posted. And he sent me a reminder. Hey, Kev, remember this a year ago when we talked about this very thing? And he was actually the one that suggested that I make that video. So I made the video. It was just a year later. Of course, you guys know what my year has been like. So now to a couple of other things that I actually forgot to mention in the video that thankful to you guys that commented that reminded me of these things. One of the things we have to think about, yes, you have battery tenders, but we have to think about exercising the charging system. You know, only running something for just a few minutes after you've started it really doesn't give the charging system enough time to really exercise that battery and heat it up. Another factor is a charging system in some cases, and this can vary, in some cases will actually only put out about a third of its charging potential while it's at idle. So we have to think about that voltage spike also, and the windings in your stator and also your voltage regulator. It can kind of overtax those things, but you know, it would take a lot of analysis and all this stuff, but we know those things to be true. So we want to, well, you know, one of the goals here is to reduce the potential for problems as much as we possibly can. And that's one of the things to consider. Now, in the video, I had mentioned condensation. And, of course, I received a ton of comments from people. Excuse me, I got a little bit of a cough. The weather up here has been, oh, it's been insane. Sub-zero temperatures at night and not a high temperature well below freezing over the past 7 days. So I've got a little bit of a cough here. But anyway, we talked about condensation, and I had many comments about, you know, well, if the humidity, and I'm in this climate controlled building, and, you know, all these things, I shouldn't have problems with condensation. But there's one factor you got to consider. One of the byproducts of combustion is actually water. Isn't that crazy? I'm sure you've started up a car before and you see the steam coming out of the tailpipe. Yes, some of that could be condensation that is built up inside the exhaust system, but that kind of proves the point even more. You have a hot exhaust that cools down, it can build up moisture. Well, the second part of that, you start this car up and you actually see water dripping out of the exhaust and it blowing steam. Well, one of the byproducts of combustion is water vapor, right? So the idea of running the engine for an extended period of time is to allow that water vapor that has been absorbed into the oil, you allow that oil time to heat up and allow the water vapor to escape from the oil through the crankcase ventilation system. So that's another aspect of where that moisture can come from, is just a byproduct of combustion. Now, another comment that I saw a few of them. They were a little snide, but that's okay. You mean to tell me that if I start my engine, I'm destroying it? No, that's not what I'm saying. But what I can tell you is that where a lot of wear is experienced in an engine is during the starting process. So when you crank an engine, all the oil, especially during the winter, all that oil is cold. It's thicker. It's more viscous. So when you crank a cold engine, it takes time for that oil to build pressure, to shoot through the lifters, through the push rods, to start lubricating the top end. It takes time for those things to happen. Do you have technically a dry start? Not always. Sometimes you can, depending on the health of your cam plate, oil pump, belting system, etc., etc. So starting an engine is a very tough time for an engine. That, and of course, 10 minutes after you shut one off is also, after it heat soaks, is a tough time for an engine to start. But regardless, that's what you deal with. Now, the second aspect is what we're trying to do is reduce the potential for problems, reduce the potential for wear. And there is no question that when you start a cold engine, you will get a blast of priming fuel, speaking in fuel injection terms or carbureted terms. Priming fuel goes psst. Carbureted bikes go when you hit the throttle. Then you have the blast of cranking fuel. While it's cranking, it needs more fuel to finally fire off. And then there is no question that it needs more fuel while the engine is cold. And as the engine warms up, it will progressively lean the fuel mixture out until you get to normal operating temperature. There's no denying the fact that the richer that you run an engine, you greatly increase the possibility that the unburned fuel from combustion can be absorbed by the oil, therefore degrading all the quality of the oil. So you factor multiple starts over and over again unnecessarily without riding it, and then lubricating all of those parts and pieces, and then giving the oil the opportunity to get hot enough so that the water vapor that's been absorbed into it can then be released through the crankcase breather system. But if you do that enough, it can create the problems like the ones I've shown in these photographs. And I have to tell you guys, these aren't the only emails I've seen. I've seen others and pictures from people and over many, many years of doing this. So anyway, let's say that I hope this answers a lot of the questions that came through in the comments of that video that was very popular. Quite a thing. So I think on the next video, we're going to start moving into more engine teardown. So I've got 2 or 3 M8s, a couple of twin cams that are on the bench here and getting ready to be torn down. And of course, I've got a couple of twin cams here that are going together and all this sort of stuff. So stay tuned, guys. We got a lot of great content coming, and I appreciate you very much. Thanks for your likes, thanks for subscribing, and thanks for your comments. Take care of yourselves and each other. Have a good one.